Most people over 65 are told the same story. Your stem cells are gone, repair is fading, and decline is the price of getting older. That story is incomplete. What the research suggests is more interesting and more useful. In many cases, the cells are still there. They are trapped inside an environment that keeps them quiet and less able to repair what matters. This is boring, physician. If that sounds subtle, good. Because subtle is where the real biology lives. Not in miracle clinics, not in expensive rejuvenation packages, and not in glossy promises. What matters here is mechanism. What is happening, why it matters, and what signals we can realistically change. Here is the first thing we need to clear up. Stem cell aging is not mainly about disappearance. It is largely about dysfunction. Your repair cells do not vanish on schedule. They lose their instructions, they lose their environment, and they lose the conditions they need to respond when tissue calls for help. That changes how we think about almost everything. Slower wound healing, weaker vaccine response, lingering muscle soreness, more fragile recovery after illness. These are not random events. In many cases, they are downstream signals of stem cells living in the wrong biological neighborhood, and that neighborhood matters more than most people realize. A healthy cell inside a toxic tissue environment underperforms. A stressed cell inside a cleaner environment can recover some function. Because now we are not asking, how do we buy new cells? We are asking, how do we stop poisoning the ones we already have? The biggest driver is something called cellular senescence. These are damaged cells that should have exited the system, but instead they stay. And once they stay, they do something worse. They start broadcasting inflammatory distress signals into nearby tissue, like a smoke alarm that never stops screaming. Those signals were meant to help in short bursts, clear damage, recruit immune cleanup, coordinate repair. But when they become chronic, they stop helping and start contaminating. The local stem cell niche, the microscopic environment where stem cells live and make decisions, becomes harder to work in. Repair slows, regeneration hesitates, inflammation becomes background noise. Now watch this. The important finding was never that one drug solved aging. It was that researchers showed this inflammatory burden is not fixed. The load can move. The niche can become less toxic. That is the breakthrough most people miss because they get distracted by the treatment and ignore the principle. And that principle matters for us because it changes the target. We need to reduce the biological static around repair cells. If you lower inflammatory noise, stem cells hear the signal more clearly. That is the theme running through everything that follows. The second mechanism is inside the cell itself. Think about the lysosome as the recycling center. It breaks down damaged material, worn-out parts, and protein debris, so the cell can reuse what still has value. In younger biology, that recycling system is disciplined. In older stem cells, it can become overloaded and dysfunctional. When that happens, the cell starts drowning in its own waste. Damaged mitochondria accumulate. Misfolded proteins linger. Inflammatory pathways switch on. The cell becomes internally congested, like a city where garbage collection has stalled and every street starts affecting every other street. What this suggests is powerful. Aging stem cells are not only being poisoned from the outside, they are also becoming less able to clean themselves from the inside. And once you see that, fasting, caloric restraint, and autophagy-supporting dietary patterns stop sounding like wellness slogans. They become biologically coherent tools aimed at cellular housekeeping. The third mechanism explains something almost everyone notices and many people mislabel as just age. Muscle injury lingers. Recovery from hard effort stretches out. Strength fades even when habits seem stable. Part of that story comes from muscle stem cells falling into a deeper resting state than they are supposed to. These satellite cells are meant to stay quiet until damage appears. Then they wake, divide, and repair. But with aging, the wake-up system becomes less responsive. The alarm clock gets quieter, so the cells stay asleep longer, even when the muscle is clearly asking for help. That deeper quiescence is one reason sarcopenia becomes so persistent. And here is where the story gets practical. Exercise does not only train muscle fibers, it changes the messaging environment around the stem cells that service those fibers. Research suggests aerobic exercise can restore activation signals, reduce inflammatory interference, and release circulating factors that make the blood itself more supportive of repair. That is why movement is not a side note here, it is central. When we exercise, we are not just burning calories. We are altering the chemical weather that stem cells live inside. Your bloodstream becomes less hostile and more regenerative. So ask yourself something. When you skip movement for days, what exactly are you training your repair system to expect? Because the body is always listening. It reads inactivity as a signal too. The fourth mechanism sits in the bone marrow and immune system. As we age, blood-forming stem cells can begin favoring short-term inflammatory output over balanced immune resilience. In simple terms, the system starts overproducing the fast, blunt responders and undersupporting the more adaptive, precise defenders. That helps explain a contradiction many older adults live with. More inflammation, but weaker protection. More background immune activity, yet less robust response to vaccines and infections. The body is not quiet, it is misallocated. It is spending energy in the wrong places. Certain hormonal and nutrient signaling pathways appear to shape that bias. When those pathways stay elevated in a way that mimics constant biological urgency, stem cells behave as if the body is living under permanent alarm. And under permanent alarm, repair gets deprioritized, inflammation gets promoted, and immune balance starts drifting. This is where fasting enters the conversation, carefully, not as a dare, not as a purity ritual, as a signal. Research suggests that reducing constant nutrient stimulation for controlled periods may shift some of those pathways and create conditions that are friendlier to stem cell reset. But longer fasts are not casual tools, especially in older adults. That matters because people hear fasting helped in research and immediately translate that into more must be better. It is not. A metabolic signal can be useful. A stressor can also become a threat. Context decides which one you are getting. The fifth mechanism ties the others together, and once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. Chronic low-grade inflammation. Not the dramatic inflammation of injury or infection, the quieter kind, the low simmer, the biological fire that never quite goes out. This persistent inflammatory background affects the whole ecosystem: bone marrow, muscle, brain, gut, immune signaling, recovery capacity. It does not always feel dramatic in the moment, which is why it is easy to ignore. But over time, it changes how tissue responds, how repair is prioritized, and how resilient the system remains under stress. That is why exercise keeps showing up again and again. Not because it is boring advice, because it directly changes the inflammatory terrain. It lowers some of the signals that keep stem cells constrained. It improves metabolic flexibility. It supports mitochondrial function. It gives the body better traffic control over glucose and energy use. And once we understand that, the protocol becomes much less mysterious. We are not chasing magic. We are cleaning the neighborhood, improving cellular housekeeping, restoring activation cues, and lowering background fire so repair can actually happen. If you value evidence-led breakdowns like this, subscribe to Boring Physician. Let's get concrete. The strongest everyday lever here is still moderate aerobic exercise, backed by resistance training. Mechanism first. Aerobic work improves inflammatory tone, circulation, and signaling around muscle stem cells. Why it matters? The repair environment becomes more permissive. Practical use. Aim for regular sessions you can sustain, not heroic bursts you cannot repeat. Then add resistance work a few times a week so muscles keep giving stem cells a reason to stay responsive. Nutrition is next, and we need to separate food quality from meal timing because they do different jobs. Food quality shapes inflammation, membrane integrity, oxidative stress, and nutrient signaling. Meal timing shapes insulin exposure, autophagy pressure, and the rhythm between repair and refueling. An anti-inflammatory Mediterranean-style pattern fits this well. Extra virgin olive oil helps calm inflammatory signaling. Why it matters? Less inflammatory noise means a cleaner niche for repair. Practical use. Build meals around it instead of around processed foods. Fatty fish matter for a similar reason. EPA and DHA support membrane function and can reduce inflammatory signaling. Why it matters? Cells communicate through membranes and immune chemistry. Practical use. Use fish regularly or discuss supplementation if intake is low and your clinician agrees it makes sense. Cruciferous vegetables matter because compounds in them support detoxification and autophagy-related pathways. Why it matters? Better housekeeping means less intracellular clutter. Practical use. Rotate broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and similar vegetables through the week, instead of treating them like garnish. Berries are interesting too, but we need to stay honest. Their polyphenols may support lower inflammation and healthier aging biology. Why it matters? The direction is promising. Practical use. Eat them because they fit a smart pattern, not because they are a miracle senolytic. Protein becomes more important with age, not less. Mechanism. Muscle protein synthesis becomes less responsive, and satellite cells need a supportive environment. Why it matters? Under-eating protein makes muscle loss easier and recovery slower. Practical use. Spread protein across the day instead of treating dinner as the only serious intake. And now, the part people underestimate. Sleep. The circadian clock helps regulate when stem cells rest, when they activate, and how tissues coordinate repair. Why it matters? Chronic sleep disruption scrambles timing signals across the system. Practical use. Consistent sleep and wake times, a cool, dark room, and morning light exposure do more biological work than they get credit for. Stress regulation belongs here for the same reason. Chronic stress keeps cortisol and inflammatory signaling elevated. Why it matters? That pushes the body towards survival mode chemistry, not repair mode chemistry. Practical use. Daily downshifting, breathing work, meditation, social connection, and time outdoors are not luxuries. They are anti-inflammatory inputs. This is educational, not medical advice. We're evidence-led and we manage risk. Supplementation is where people usually lose the plot. Some options have logic. Some have hype. Vitamin D matters if you are deficient because immune function and aging biology both care about it. Omega-3s may help if your dietary intake is weak. Quercetin from food is reasonable. But chasing aggressive supplement stacks while ignoring exercise, sleep, protein, and inflammation control is like repainting a house that is still on fire. And there are real cautions here. Certain drugs interact with fasting. Some supplements interact with blood thinners, thyroid medication, or immunosuppressants. Rapid weight loss in an older adult is not a victory if muscle and resilience are what you are actually losing. That is why risk management matters more than enthusiasm. So what should you expect if you do this consistently? Not fireworks. Early changes are often invisible. Better energy, slightly better sleep, less day-to-day drag. Then, with time, biomarkers may improve, recovery tends to improve, grip strength and endurance can improve, and the system starts looking less inflamed and more responsive. And no, there is no magical deadline where all of this stops mattering. That idea is seductive, but it is not supported. Your cells are responding to your environment now, in your 60s, in your 70s, in your 80s. Earlier compounds better, yes, but later is not useless. So here is the real question. Are you sending your body signals of repair or signals of decline? Because every skipped walk, every chaotic sleep cycle, every ultra-processed default meal, every week of sitting under chronic stress is a message. And every better choice is a message too. Drop a comment with the habit you think changes this biology the fastest. I want to see where you land, because most people get this wrong. And one more thing before you leave. If your stem cells are not disappearing, and many of them are mainly being suppressed by inflammatory noise, poor signaling, and metabolic congestion, then the most dangerous myth in aging may not be that decline is inevitable. It may be that your body stopped listening. It did not stop listening, and that should make all of us pause. The unsettling part is that it may be listening to everything,